I'm gonna tie in this one. So this is actually this is the I think this is the greater message and what would be more valuable than what I've led up to with this series. So what I was talking about is how it's some of the perceptual bias of people in general, of things and people in general, but I was express more so coming from the stance of a man and a man of color, and maybe a man who's marginalized ethnically and racially, but more so socially, because I think that a person from any ethnicity and race, they can have a different favor and acceptance socially from one person to another. Part of being accepted for being accepted is profound in any race or ethnicity. So all of marginalization and all of prejudice, all of I think maybe some people don't look at I think there's a word for able. I think there's a word for discrimination as it refers to able-bodiedness, and I think that sometimes people can you can be discriminated for almost anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you're discriminated for as far as something of a deficiency that you have. You can also be discriminated upon in terms of a proficiency. An example of that is that you imagine that there's something like, say, a conscription in times past, and that's just maybe a crude example. Now, some people would say that maybe not be a perfect example because you have implications of duty, which even duty can still be a form of conscription, because who really does have the duty of doing the most rigorous and potentially dangerous or fatal occupations and roles? A lot of us would say that that falls to the men implicitly, but that still might be a form of at least detriment, or what would amount to someone's undoing and painful death, as a form of their very able-bodiedness. So sometimes actually, people who are disabled they can have incredible contempt and deprivation as a point of being disabled. But sometimes you can also have a degree of leverage and favor also with the appearance of being disabled, and someone who is considered able-bodied can be dismissed in terms in just in terms of status or leverage for actually exactly being able-bodied. Is that yeah, we don't care about you because you should be able to take care of yourself because you're able-bodied. And I don't disagree with that, but just that it can anything can go both ways. But I think the same can be true of mental ableness, or we'd say giftedness, but maybe gifted is arbitrary, because the very things that would seem to benefit you can be a detriment, as people who have mental strengths and receive punishment for that. Or some things that may be appear as a detriment can also be a favor, because you might have, say you have a mental you're affected mentally as a young person, and mathematics is very challenging for you, yet by you engaging with math so much because it's challenging, or maybe some of the blessings and opportunities you had from some of the support you got by being by having a deficiency in math, might actually amount to you having a strength in math, or at least academics or professional life beyond that. So you really can't say whether something works in your favor entirely or not. But just that discrimination can go both ways in terms of able-bodiedness or disabledness, or able-mindedness, or what's called a mental disability, where I think that disability, that might be the interesting thing. What is and is not a disability, and is it a disability if a person appreciates it as a disability or not? Can you tell someone what is a disability or not? If someone has injured themselves in a way, but it actually gave them a strength at some point, and they don't want to be called disabled because they appreciate themselves as being strong, or they can demonstrate being strong or at least as a consequence of what you're calling them disabled for, is that yet a disabled? Are they disabled? And would you be appropriate, or would you be justified in writing them off, or costing them opportunities to use their actual able-bodiedness, or their ableness that they can demonstrate, but because you feel and have decided according to your preconceived training, which I think all training has limitations. We can't say that any form of training is sublime and perfect. Any form of military training, any form of athletic training, any form of intellectual training, artistic training, has oversights and redundancies and limitations that are a method and feature of that exact employment of training, or the approach to that training. So your very training that you're leveraging against a person to deny them self-respect or esteem in the eyes of others, or professional and personal social opportunities, can be a form of violence, I think. But that's not to say that people don't struggle with different things, but sometimes people actually struggle for not struggling, or they struggle because of what's actually a strength. It can amount to a struggle, how other people approach that. At different times, like maybe the able-bodied person would be what's called cannon fodder. And I'm not trying to be dismissive to anyone who has lost people or who has served in roles of service, but some people could be appreciated as cannon fodder, and your very able-bodied people would be the first ones going off to be cannon fodder. And if you were in that predicament and you had something that was appreciated as a disability, you might not regret having what's called a disability to watch someone or to survive that type of conscription come through your area. So all I meant to say is that there are redundancies and contradictions in how we approach things. But what's significant though is to be a man is still significant, and that's what I wanted to go with this, is that it's still yet significant to be a man. And sometimes I think that people forget what it is to be a man. And I think that one of the most, I'm gonna be blunt, I'm gonna be straightforward with this. There was a famous person named what's his name, Nietzsche. And he was an intellectual, and he was an original thinker. I think a better word than another word than intellectual would be Muni in Sanskrit. That's an original thinker, a compelling person, but more, at least an original person. And you meet a couple of people like that in popular culture and also in life. The order Osho, I think his real name was Rajneesh something, but his title was Osho, which means teacher in Japan, and he was famous with the title Osho and also his name Rajneesh. He would be an original thinker. I think it's pretty apparent if you watch any of his content on YouTube or on Audible. The content on Audible is outstanding, but YouTube also has some of his interviews that were outstanding. But then Nietzsche was like that, and Nietzsche had a girlfriend who was she fancied intellectuals back then. And there's one like affluent man who fell in love with her, and I think she broke his heart to the point of him committing suicide. But at one point she was quoted as saying that the essence of joy or thrill for her as a woman is the reception of the male essence in the act of making love. She said that, but I would say that might be true for a woman, or a male who identifies with a woman or enjoys making love as a woman. But what's also significant for a male, whether however a male identifies, I think, or women also, humans also, maybe men, women, and child, but at least for men, one of the really compelling things about life is the point of something of resistance breaking, to the point of surmounting resistance, overcoming something. That exact point where resistance breaks and you succeed in the form of like combat or fighting, that would be very significant, but also addictive and thrilling. If you actually overcame someone in some kind of contest of critical consequences and challenge, that would be very significant. One thing that an actual soldier could enjoy, as taxing and depriving as the life of a soldier would be, to actually overcome and surmount an obstacle or opposition might be profound for a soldier, but also just for an ordinary person. But it doesn't always have to be resistance in the form of opposition. Sometimes resistance can be more formidable in the form of apathy, contempt, or just being ignored and overlooked, and also being in people compelling you to change who you are. These different people who present themselves as professionals and take an interest, that is, I think in terms of garnering resources, we're interested in things as a form of predation. Even two people on a date, or in a certain sense, can be appreciated as a form of predation. Two people making love in an adult film, that can be appreciated as a form of predation, in a way that the dynamic is similar to a deer and a wolf. A wolf enjoying a deer is similar to people making love, or even people enjoying each other on a date, or even a professional soliciting a client or a patient that would not choose to do so unless they had to, is a form of predation, in my opinion. But but to surmount, but all these different things want us to change. That's the thing that is violence par excellence. To change another person according to your understanding and your will for another person is to overcome another person in the most egregious and disingenuous and traumatic version of iteration of the word violence is to overcome a person, whether with your status, your title, your medicine that you curated with God knows what, that does God knows what to a person, that fundamentally changes them. That is overcoming them in the worst way. But if you can yet remain yourself and overcome these obstacles, but also being ignored in the indifference and the apathy of a society that does not care about you or know about you, and yet remain yourself, at the point that that breaks, that's complete joy and complete health. Just like a flu breaking, that's complete health. And that's a man.